Life Audio.
Welcome to the Crosswalk Devotional. We're glad to have you listening with us. Today's topic is how experiencing awe can lead us to God's wisdom. We'll return with the devotional after a brief message from our sponsors. Wisdom begins with awe. Written and read by Whitney Hopler. Wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Proverbs 1:7 CEB. Sitting in the sanctuary of the Washington National Cathedral, I enjoyed a powerful experience of sound and light. Majestic organ music reverberated off the cathedral's stone walls so strongly that I could feel the vibrations. Sunlight streamed in through the colorful stained glass windows around me. As the sound and light washed over me and directed my attention to God, I felt a sense of awe. Everything that had distracted me earlier, such as my to-do list and stories I'd read in the news that day, cleared out of my mind so I could focus on God. I learned more of God's wisdom that day, as awe helped me pay attention to the Creator of all sound and light. All enlarged my perspective, giving me reverence for God and inspiring me to seek God's wisdom. In Proverbs 1:7, the Bible reveals that wisdom starts with fearing God. In our modern context, the word fear often has negative connotations. It usually refers to something scary. However, in the biblical sense, fearing God isn't about being afraid of Him. Instead, it's about feeling awe for God. It's recognizing that God is perfectly loving, holy, and powerful, and letting that inspire a deep sense of reverence for God in our souls. The fear of the Lord refers to being in awe of who God is. It means recognizing God's greatness and seeking God's guidance for our lives because we know that God truly knows what's best for us. This awe of God is the foundation of wisdom, because it reorients our entire perspective. When we live in awe of God, we understand that God is the source of all truth and knowledge. We realize that our human understanding is limited, and we need God's guidance to make the best decisions in life. This humility before God is where true wisdom begins. It leads us to practice discernment, which helps us learn which choices are truly the best ones to make day by day. The second part of Proverbs 1:7 contrasts the wise with those who are foolish, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. A fool, according to the Bible, is someone who rejects God's ways, believing they know better. They refuse to be taught, preferring their own ideas and desires over the wisdom that comes from God. In essence, they live without regard for God's authority. And as a result, their lives are full of confusion and stress. Seeking wisdom, on the other hand, is not just about intellectual knowledge. It's about living in harmony with God's will and purposes. When we fear the Lord, we begin to see life from God's perspective. We start to value what God values and desire to live according to His ways. This kind of wisdom is practical and comes from our relationships with God. We find the inspiration we need to seek wisdom by discovering and appreciating the wonder of God's work in our lives. The more we experience God's wonder and feel awe, the more inspired we become to grow closer to God and learn from His wisdom. We respect our Creator's ultimate authority and recognize Him as the source of all that is good and true. We trust God knows what's best for us, even when we don't fully understand His ways. This kind of trust requires us to let go of our pride and open ourselves up to God's work in every part of our lives. When we are in awe of the Lord, we welcome wisdom into our lives. This doesn't mean we will never face challenges or make mistakes, but it does mean that our lives will be grounded in the truths of who God is. We will be guided by God's wisdom, which will always lead us to what's best. In a fallen world that often emphasizes self-sufficiency and personal ambition, Proverbs 1:7 calls us to a different way of living. It invites us to begin with awe, a deep respect for God's greatness, which motivates us to seek God's wisdom for our decisions. This is the path to wisdom, which not only guides us, but also transforms us for the better. So let's embrace this reverent awe of the Lord every day. As we do, we will find that God's wisdom is not only accessible, but abundantly available to us. Intersecting faith and life. As you consider how wisdom begins with awe, reflect on these questions. When have you recently felt a deep sense of reverent awe for God? How did that experience inspire you to seek God's wisdom? In what ways does experiencing awe for God give you a fresh perspective so you can make important decisions with wisdom? What practical steps can you take to experience more of God's wonder and develop more awe for God? Further reading. Proverbs 9:10, Psalm 111:10, James 1:5, Job 28:28, Ecclesiastes 12:13.
The Crosswalk Devotional is a production of Life Audio and Salem Media. If you liked what you heard today, please take a second to rate and review this podcast in your favorite podcast app so that more listeners like you can find the show. For more faith-filled, inspirational podcasts, visit us at lifeaudio.com.